Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's event. I'm Willie Santiago, the manager of programs and resources for APAP. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a fair-skinned Hispanic person with brown eyes, medium length, wavy brown hair, and I'm wearing a gray or a brown sweater, rather. I want to acknowledge that APAP is located in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., on the ancestral lands of the Piscataway and the Costin and Pamunkey people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations, and I want to pay my respect to the elders, both past, present, and future. Closed captioning does appear automatically on your screen. If you would like to hide them, click more and then hide subtitle. We are excited to be hosting a series of affinity groups this fall, and we're so glad that you're able to join us for our joint affinity group this afternoon. These affinity groups are a great way to connect with people of the same identity or profession as you. So for all the upcoming ones that we do encourage allyship within our membership. However, for the ones listed next on the screen, they are meant solely for those who identify with that specific identity group. And for at least for this one, we do have a second development of affinity group happening on November 29th that will also be hosted by Mindy and Tamara. We also have some upcoming programming and webinars over the next month or so. We are doing a 3-part Welcome to the Field series. It is a series on how the presenting, booking, and touring field operates, and is meant as an introductory course for those who have been in the field under 5 years. This course, it is open to all. It is open to the public. Anyone can register for it. So please stay tuned for more details. And then we will have our final Real Talk in Real Time on December 6th. For more information on our upcoming programming, you can visit apap365.org/programs. I will now turn things over to your facilitators, Tamara and Mindy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mindy Street, and I have brown curly hair. I have on big navy earrings and a navy sweater, and I am coming to you live from the Jay and Susie Gooch Performing Arts Center at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. And Tamara and I have the privilege and fun times being co-leads to the Development Affinity Group for APAP. And so Willie covered just about everything for us, but I did want to mention we will be at APAP in January leading either 1 or 2 sessions alongside Willie and his team. Two, he just raised his hand, confirmed 2. Yay! So we look forward to hopefully seeing many of you there in person. And now I'm going to let Tamara introduce herself and then our speakers for the day. So glad you could join us. This is really fun to have development and marketing together today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tamara Kashecki, white woman, short brown hair. I am coming to you from the lobby of the historic St. George Theater Restoration in New York City today. Really happy to be hosting with Mindy and exciting to introduce our speakers today. So we're going to hear from Roger Sametz and Ronnie Reich. Ronnie was part of our development affinity group in person at the conference last year, and she gave a fabulous presentation. Everybody loved it. So when she offered to speak with us all on part of this group, we jumped on it. So Ronnie is previously a vocal music performance. She went to Peabody. She's got an MS from Columbia Grad School in journalism. And she has worked before for the New York State Council on the Arts, which we call NYSCA here in New York. And then Roger is the president and CEO of Sametz. He's their lead strategist, and he really works to define and articulate branding and communication strategies with his clients to help them connect with their constituencies and advance organizational goals. So today they're going to present for us and talk about strengthening your brand to bolster attendance and fundraising. So I'm going to kick it over to Ronnie and Roger, and we will have a little Q&A at the end. So feel free, if you have a question or a comment, to place it in the chat, and we'll circle back around when they're complete with their presentation. Thanks.
Great. So I will attempt to share my screen. And see if we can make that happen. Okay, let me just move a few things around here. Does everybody see the title slide?
Yes.
Great. Okay, we're going to dive in. Ronnie and I are going to talk a little bit back and forth. So today's, figure out which button is going to work. Okay, we're launched. Agenda looks a little daunting, but we're going to clip along. And also, for those of you who just joined, this being recorded, so you can have it. And there are some DIY worksheets at the end that we'll also send out. So a little bit about us, some challenges that presenting organizations face, and then we'll get into how to strengthen your brand, a roadmap, and the bits underneath it. Research, brand foundation, brand strategy, message development, visual expression, and then how all this sort of comes together, sort of own it. And then we'll close. Ronnie will walk us through a case study for a large presenting organization that we've been working with for a couple of years. And it's not clicking. So we're a Boston-based consultancy. We do all the stuff that you see in these bottom bullets, from research through to fundraising strategies and marketing strategies and communications, through to workshops for staff and leadership. Oops, this is having a little trouble here, sorry. We have a pretty deep performing arts practice, from big orchestras like the Boston Symphony, Seattle, Atlanta, a lot of presenting organizations, again, some large ones like Segerstrom, some smaller ones like Newport Classical, which was formerly Newport Music. And what we're going to talk to really applies to all different sizes. So to start with, to sort of set up what we think are sort of challenges that you face from the work that we've been doing across organizations. Presenting organizations' brands are often eclipsed by the better known brands of the acts you present. So, in Boston, if I were to drive a few years ago by Symphony Hall and there was some big poster for Barbara Cook, and she was alive, I would have thought Symphony Hall was, presenting Barbara Cook, even though that might have been Celebrity Series or some other presenter. If you own your venue, you might be only seen as a location and not actually get credit for, curating what you're presenting. Or you're seen as for profit, and people think, well, don't your ticket revenues cover everything? So that makes it a little hard to raise money. I'm sorry, this is not responding entirely well here. And sometimes the range of offerings, if you have a range of offerings, can make it hard for people to find their, point of connection. If you're presenting classical, or you're presenting, rock, or you're presenting comedy, people might quite not know who you are. And then getting imagery and using imagery from, your act's agents and managers can make it even harder, because it can look fairly disparate. So the result, you don't organically, build a high level brand through what you do. It's not immediately clear unless you're making that effort to build your brand. Who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why you're worthy of support. And often, because you have to sell tickets, you're often selling from the bottom up. In other words, you're devoting most of your real estate and marketing to whatever that offering is. It's a big effort for each offering, and you're probably being shortchanging who you are. So therefore, you're sort of building the trust necessary to take risks. If everything is selling from the bottom up, you have to count on that act bringing things in, rather than, we always trust, your organization to give us a good time. So even if we haven't heard of that particular act, let's give it a whirl. So you don't get credit for your hard work, and fundraising is often hard. So here's an example of Celebrity Series, which is a large presenting organization in Boston. This is like 15 years ago, before we started working with them. And, anyone driving by these banners, it looks like, it's all about Alvin Ailey. Or if you look at the, marquee sign, the Wang Theater is bringing you Alvin Ailey. And Celebrity Series is kind of lost. So they weren't getting any credit. They were sort of a pass-through, if they were even thought about anything. So today, elevating your brand is really more important than ever. But, while it drives decisions in your favor or not, depending on, how you're managing your brand, it does need to be managed with intent. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. So in thinking about your brand, as opposed to, the label on the back of, jeans, or the badge on a car, it's really your promise, your history, your position in the landscape, and your vision. And that's expressed through your offerings. That's certainly a big way that people understand you. The experiences you deliver, which go beyond that particular offering, certainly your communications, and the impact that you have. And underneath this, are strategic decisions around the attributes you want to be known for, your architecture of offerings and sub-brands, if you're large enough to have sub-brands, how you're messaging to your different constituents, and how you're presenting things visually. And these 4 things are going to drive a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So, Ronnie, dig in.
Yes. So how do you go about strengthening your brand now that we've talked a little bit about what brand in our arts nonprofit context means? We like to go through a collaborative, organic process to engage constituents, raise your stature, increase trust, ultimately bolster earned and contributed income. So we'll walk through a little bit of a process of how together we could begin doing something like that. So first, we want to get calibrated. We want to talk to the people who know you, have interviews, sometimes quantitative surveys, audit communications, both yours and those of your peers, evolve a brand strategy, how your different offerings fit together and how people can find their point of connection, how to express your brand verbally, your messaging, your name, your content, visual, logo, and design system. You want to develop engaging communications across different channels and media. And then you want to be able to own your brand assets, to have everything documented and everyone who needs to use your brand trained appropriately so that you can connect constituents, achieve your goals, and across all work that your brand is doing, lift up both marketing and development. They work together, not in silos. So how do we get calibrated? We talked about wanting to do some interviews to engage different rings of stakeholders. We like to start with those who are closest to setting the vision for the organization and working outward so that we learn what various people, how they see you, what they appreciate about you, what starts to rise up in common across all of these groups: staff, subscribers, donors, partners, single ticket attendees, arts interested public who may or may not frequent you but are aware of you, and civic leaders whose buy-in you would especially appreciate. And sometimes we'll hold these through in-person workshops, brainstorming sessions. Sometimes, often, we're on Zoom, as we are now. Sometimes we'll even meet in an arts venue to do this. A little more fun, maybe even have some wine. You see, who are we targeting? What do we want them to care about, think, and do? Same goes for ticket buyers as it does for donors, education participants, civic leaders, across all the groups who care about. We want to be aware of those points of connection and engagement. So we're looking here at a communications audit for the Seattle Symphony. You may think some of these pieces look interesting on their own, but you wouldn't look at this as a group and think, that's the Seattle Symphony. I know who they are. I know what they represent. I know I can appreciate X kind of experience from them. These are all very disparate materials. And the same goes for all of their different series. These really don't look like they would come from the same organization, much less the same piece. Looking here at an external audit, where do you sit among your competitors? So for Newport Classical, there's the Folk Festival and the Jazz Festival, both of which are much better known than what was previously Newport Music Festival. We renamed to Newport Classical. So you look at the competitors to see where you fit in the landscape. Maybe if everybody's using red and gold where you are, you don't want to do that, for example. What's working? What might you want to adapt? And we try to evolve a brand foundation from guiding attributes, develop a vision, and ways in for donors based on our research. So we think of attributes in 3 columns: those that are owned, positive, that you want to reinforce, what you're known for on the ground today; those that are aspirational, that are either true and people just don't know them as well as they should, or that could be credible or true with a little bit of work on the ground; and those you want to manage away, that are misperceptions, outdated, kind of baggage. So we'll look at those attributes for Lyric Opera of Chicago, how they went about defining those. So some of those own to reinforce attributes: artistic excellence, high quality, emotionally moving performances, a historic or iconic institution with buildings to match, innovative organization, sophistication, elegance as well. They want to be known for being more dynamic, more fun, A range of endeavors beyond main stage opera, closely aligned with and valued by Chicago, relevant to diverse citizens of the city, welcoming and inviting. A lot of these are common among different arts organizations. You'll see as we go through more of these. Manage away the idea that it's elitist, it's not relevant, it's hard to connect with, they're old, stuffy, or just too expensive. We'll look at attributes in our worksheets and throughout this presentation, so you'll be able to develop your own for your own organization. And these are really important because they inform how we write, design, post, present, everything we say, how we behave, all of our communications. And here's an evolved vision that we use building on the research and these attributes. Lyric is leading the advancement of opera in America. Through artistic excellence coupled with innovative, relevant programming, initiatives to connect with and grow new audiences, engagement with communities to ignite creativity across Chicago, and a modernized opera house that is the setting for truly moving experiences, Lyric is reimagining what it means to experience great opera today. This collaborative vision will deliver ever more exciting and thought-provoking audience and community experiences, while increasing the gravitational pull of our art form, our company, and our city. So you can see where some of those relevant to the city, innovative, moving emotionally type of attributes come through here. We also look at identifying donor interests and passions. You don't have to have just one reason that everyone gives money to support you. We often look for a menu of ways in. So for lyric opera, some examples: ensuring a sustainable future for opera, advancing artistic excellence, preserving the canon, advancing new work. A lot of performing arts organizations have that same mix of things there. Bringing power and creativity of the art form to new audiences, being a resource across Chicago communities. Some people care about the Art Deco Opera House, training artists of the future, reflecting the diversity of the city. All of these, totally valid, great ways in.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about, and we are kind of cruising through this quickly, but we'll hopefully have some time for questions. You know, I had mentioned at the top that a lot of presenting organizations really market from the bottom up. You know, it's about this act, it's about that act. And, you know, I'm sure all of you, you know, in your rectangles here, you know, pretty good at the tactical marketing and talking about different offerings. But what's often needed is institutional messaging at the top. And, you know, finding real estate and places to sneak that in and, you know, writing it and articulating it, because the combo platter, you know, really adds context and value and helps to communicate, you know, sort of the why and so what, and build that trust that's needed if you're going to take risks and present things, you know, that, you know, are mission valuable, but not necessarily, you know, going to sell themselves. So we're going to look at 4 very quickly brand strategies. So top left, you know, if you're at an airport, you're sending at Hudson News, you know, these are all made by Mars, but Mars deliberately hides that. So these have no connection and no nonprofit in their right mind would put their sub brands out there like this, although they do. So what a lot of organizations do is what's called endorsed branding, which is essentially that product branding. You know, Ginger Snaps doesn't look like Oreos, but you know, that Nabisco triangle is that endorsing agent. So a lot of organizations, you know, the act is 98% of whatever the communication is, and there's this teeny little, you know, Nabisco who it's coming from, which is not generally enough. Bottom left, we probably coined the term source branding some years ago, but you can see the difference here. You've got different names. You've still got, you know, Bordeaux's and Genevas and Milanos, but there's clearly a system here. Even if you sort of go wider into, you know, stuffing and bread, you can recognize it and you sort of know who's bringing things to you. And then lastly, master branding, which you're probably familiar with, you know, Entenmann's, which is maybe more on the East Coast, you know, it just says cake and strudel in Danish. So that doesn't give you a lot of room to have anything interesting going on. So something a little more than endorsed, closer to source, is probably useful. So again, we're using Lyric for a lot of our examples here, but you know, they were going to market, they were kind of all over the place. So, and they had never attended to their brand in 70 odd years. So, you know, putting together, you know, Fleetwood Mac experience with La Boheme with no sort of, you know, rational way of dividing up the, you know, their offerings was confusing to people. You they had a great program, Chicago Voices, that was all across, that was, building on sort of different communities. Didn't even say lyric, and they wondered why they didn't get credit. Or their interesting stuff like operas in English, they put under an unlimited brand, intentionally distancing it so that, essentially the cool stuff that they were doing, they didn't get credit for. And then, they had a musical at the end of every season, largely to raise money. And it was totally confused with, Broadway in Chicago, which was, another brand, and no one had any idea who was bringing this to them. So the result, they certainly weren't getting credit. But this is sort of where we, push them. So you can see, again, even if you're having, bread and goldfish, you can tell where it comes from. And this sign, which I just captured at my neighborhood Hannaford's last week, you don't even need to know that on that sort of point of purchasing, there's goldfish on the top and then Milanos and then bread. You just know it because it's under that Pepperidge Farm banner in this sort of system thinking. So the goal is really, for whatever offering you're putting out there, you want some of what you're doing communication wise to make sure the value accrues to your organization so you get stronger, so that you have that brand heft, to bring other offerings and innovations, which makes your brand stronger. You kind of get the idea. You want to keep this virtuous circle going. So all this thinking comes together in a brief as part of this phase, where the audits, the internal and external audits, recommendations, these are just sample pages of what was probably 80 pages. But it's then takes that diagram at the beginning, that roadmap, and fleshes it out so that everybody can sort of agree before mouse hits mouse pad to write messages or design things visually, what the directions are. So now we'll get a little more, tactical and get right into messaging. Ronnie?
Yes, thank you. So building more on that research to the next phase of our circle chart we looked at earlier, we'll want to build a messaging framework with brand storylines, a high-level elevator message, and constituent-focused messages. In all of this, we want to find what you stand for, your value propositions, the messages you want to get out there, what your prospective stakeholders care about, and where that intersection is. That's where you can win, and that's where we want to start the conversation. So we think of messaging as a framework because you're not monolithic and your audiences are not homogeneous. So you have, let's say, 4 different audiences in this diagram, and you do want to have one consistent high-level message that gets at that essence of who you are, what you do, why it matters. But we also then develop tilted or constituent-specific messages. And these messages, the high-level and the tilted, are made up of what we call storylines. These are key brand concepts about your organization. And then all of this can be proven with stories and facts and figures. We'll show you what that looks like for Newport Classical. So some foundational storylines here. This is an intimate, immersive concert experience you won't find anywhere else. A warm, welcoming community connected by love of classical music. Stunning venues like the big Newport mansions play a starring role in every performance. Stunning venues, also where you can develop up-and-coming and world-renowned talent. Newport's an internationally renowned cultural and recreational destination, and classical music is for everyone. It's also worthy of multi-generational, community-wide support and living its commitment to diversity. So you can see how these come together to build up that high-level message. Premier Performing Arts Organization, Summer Festival with a year-round chamber series, free community concerts, intimate, immersive experiences, storied venues across Newport, world-renowned and up-and-coming artistic talents, and an essential pillar of the New England cultural landscape. So the way we would tilt this for new audiences, we get to be quite a bit more about the experience, welcoming people of every age, culture, and background, maybe enticing them with glamorous receptions at the mansions and open-air performances, a range of different kinds of artists, sounds, formats, with something for everyone to enjoy, share with you the power of classical music. For donors, it's a little bit different. They're already invested in the art form, so they want to connect with you as the premier performing arts organization in their area. that you're the ones giving them world-renowned talents and up-and-coming artists in these unique venues. We welcome you to invest with us in the future of classical music and ensure that we can continue to bring this to everyone in our community.
So, we want to put messaging to work, and visual expression today, especially for younger audiences, really is messaging. So the goal is to craft a recognizable, compelling identity that, importantly, especially for presenting organizations, provides some glue year to year. So people often make the mistake, if you're doing a subscription brochure, for instance, what's it going to look like this year? And you sort of, go for fresh on the kitchen table versus building brand equity. And, our take is that you need to, and you can do both. So in terms of visual system, you might have your logo, we call primary identifier, but how you approach type and color and imagery and gesture and composition, those choices that you make, what typeface, but also how's that typeface used? And then what's the relationship among these different elements in this chart here is how you get to be recognized. So, we'll look at a couple of marks. So this was the earlier American Symphony Orchestra League, which also had the unfortunate acronym of ASOL. So, we renamed it, different mark, the Fermata there. This was the earlier mark for Newport Music Festival. Nobody kind of understood the sailing piano. This is the new mark, new name, new mark. And you can see how the sub-brands, cohere, but they also have a little bit, but not too much differentiation. Celebrity Series, which we looked at earlier, this is actually a mark we did years ago, but with the new sort of leadership, it wanted to be more energetic, more about world music, so you can see how that changed. Or Sydney Symphony, perfectly acceptable baton swoosh. This is the mark that we did, and you want to be able to tell a story. So, is this the orchestra? Is this exuberance? Is this the audience? Is this the repertoire? And, it worked well for them until everybody left and they canned the mark. But hey, that happens. Still a really good mark. And then sometimes, there's a system, as we did for BSO, and these have lasted 24 years or so. So going back to lyric, just to show you how that sort of plays out, you certainly want to understand how you work your identifier, but you want to have a palette so that you're not like all over the place. You want to have a way of dealing with sort of color, how that, again, that palette gets articulated. Brand typefaces and how those are used. And then, in thinking about imagery, people often say, well, let's, take this shot, or we have to use this shot from a management firm. But, think about it in these different categories of, artists versus the participants versus where it all happens. And in the case of lyric, we added a level of evocative marketing imagery because they had all these sort of big proscenium shots that had no affect at all. But now all the stuff really, gets pretty emotional. And we also use type as image. Again, anything to sort of, differentiate, like sort of pull stuff together, but add that little sort of corner that comes up. And then the goal is with a system, you can tune communications to different audiences. Planned giving is not the same as trying to reach out to, 20-somethings who've never come to your shop. So here's, the lyric cover where we started. Here's the one that, developed out of the system. You can see it's emotional. You can see this frame that goes around it, this lyric frame. That is one of the design elements that holds everything together. And then inside, we want to make sure that the messages that we've developed, part of which Ronnie read you, are there. So it's not just, act, act, act. We were stealing some real estate to make sure that we're elevating the organization, because this is essentially a presenting organization. Even in the program books, we make sure that inside we're doing more than just giving the programs. And it runs right through to sort of the website where you can see these sort of cards of the different acts, but they all hold together. You can see the emotional imagery, and on the right, you can see some of those main storylines. You make it possible, lyric is for everyone, the next generation. These are key concepts, creativity across Chicago. That's all there. Outreach into the communities, partnering with schools. Right through, you can see the system through in, digital ads, 3 sheets. And you would never mistake an email because they are so branded between the borders on the side, which we all decided the color was called Montepulciano, which we kind of liked, and that lyric frame. And the frame is so strong that you can use different colors because the geometry holds it all together, right through to development material. So this is sort of entry level, friends. And then as you sort of move up one notch, it's more about realizing the vision, the future of opera America. And then as you move, one notch even further to benefactors, because it's this 3-tiered system here, it's all about being a valued collaborator and providing investment. So it's not about giving, it's about investing. So looking at a completely different visual system, just to give you a sense of sort of how this could work, New Jersey Symphony, which we sort of, well, it used to say orchestra, now we've sort of simplified that, a completely different, really sort of dynamic, edgy visual system competing with Philadelphia Orchestra, the New York Phil. They're kind of in a tough spot. So we're trying to sort of build on the fact that they were more nimble, had more innovative programming. And you can also see the sub-branding here. So all their community outreach is under this rubric of everywhere. They made, instead of, during COVID, instead of just like filming things, they really made high-def films. And even, sorry, you can see the email on the left, or, a fairly conventional solicitation letter on the right, but it doesn't look like a fairly conventional solicitation letter because there's so much visual branding. And then right through to sort of 3 tiers of giving society. So they hold together, they're a portfolio, but, the copy is moving people through. And then lastly, celebrity series, which we looked at the beginning here, where you couldn't sort of tell who they were. The whole idea of that you get, imagery from a management firm, but you can put it in, a branded context. So these are not pictures that they in any way, but it's building equity across these different years, even though we're using stock imagery. And through their development materials, these are both covers for development pieces that actually hold different cards. Again, imagery from somewhere else, but it's very clearly from them. These are sort of the cards that go in there that have sort of main messages. This is sort of a folder that, you can, about to unflap there. So the last sort of chunk of this is really about, owning your asset. So if you develop your attributes, your strategy around the relationship between and among your brands, messaging, and a visual system, this needs to get sort of documented and trained. So some example here from the BSO, because we worked with them for 23 years or so. There's a pretty deep documentation, which there is for all the things we've shown you. But so going back, like, I don't know, I can't quite read it, but, back 15, 20 years here, what things looked like. And then, going fast forward, 15 years, the same system. Or if you look at Tanglewood, which of course does a lot of presenting, you go back to 2009, what the system looked like, and then go ahead to 2017. So it's showing if you have a system that is based on approaches and not everything has to look identical, you actually can do both. You can look fresh and you can build that equity, which is really important, right through to development materials. So these are two, a development piece for the BSO and a development piece for Tanglewood. So sort of lastly here, before Ronnie takes us on a quick tour of our final case here, if you think about return on investment, because sometimes you have to convince, leadership why it's worth doing this. We sort of think about it in terms of hard and soft and short term and medium term and longer term, but there are different kind of metrics, across here. And again, we can get you this show. So Ronnie will now walk us through Segerstrom Center for the Arts, which sort of pulls all this stuff together. Take about 7 minutes or so, and we should have plenty of time for questions. Ronnie?
Yes, so a little bit of background. Segerstrom Center for the Arts is a big multidisciplinary performing arts center in Orange County, California. They have Broadway, a great dance series, music, free community program, very robust education, not always getting credit for all of this. And they also have to compete for tickets, dollars, recognition with Music Center in LA and a lot of arts in the region. So where we started, they were taking very little ownership of what they were presenting. You can see here, the Segerstrom versus the Broadway is back here. This headline demonstrates what a lot of people thought about the center. It's where the Broadway shows are in Orange County, a location for one specific thing, not a multifaceted nonprofit curator. And you see similar disparateness here and the brand of Segerstrom receding. We know shows have to sell tickets and they often come with very specific design requirements, but when they look this dissimilar, people lose their connection to you and you don't get credit.
This is a great example of just selling from the bottom up.
And you can also see that variance even when they're presenting their own offerings, like two pretty different ways of presenting their ballet school here. And same thing, their plaza, totally different visual look, and Segerstrom receding into the background again. And the same is true when you look at different sub-brands here. Arts Teach education programs, Summer at the Center, Studio D, could all have come from completely different places. And you might go to Studio D and not even know you're at the Segerstrom Center. And you can see how this played out across different programs and materials.
Right, and what it really means is they're spending a lot more money for a lot less recognition.
Exactly. So here's a competitive audit, Carnegie Hall, BAM, Music Center, Kimmel Cultural Campus, all very distinctive brands and cultural organizations. And the attributes that we evolved for the center: beautiful complex, entertaining, family-friendly, high quality, inspiring, the place for performance in Orange County. Want to be known as more of a community resource, more diverse and inclusive, more dynamic. Also be known as a nonprofit and do that fundraising more effectively, more welcoming, and manage away notions of it being exclusive or elitist, expensive, intimidating, traditional, or out of touch. So all of the research, as you saw before, comes together in a brief, covers strategy, visual, messaging, audits, and so on. So we evolved positioning out of this with those competitors in mind, that the Segerstrom is a must-visit performing arts leader, the destination for performing arts in Orange County, the cultural town square, home to a robust array of cultural experiences. Also, their dance was really a standout offering that we thought should be elevated. At the same time, they're a vital community presence and educator, one of the nation's most impactful providers of arts education. They reach over 300,000 students every year. So some of the brand storylines, you can see the best at Segerstrom. They're Orange County's home for the performing arts, home to one of those nation's most impactful arts education programs, vibrant, beautiful campus, the epicenter of Orange County cultural life. And how these come together in that messaging framework. Won't read you all of it, but we'll just kind of show that methodology again. Revel in creativity. At Segerstrom Center for the Arts, you can immerse yourself in world-celebrated culture and performance, from glittering hits straight from Broadway to timeless and innovative dance, from intimate jazz concerts to side-splitting comedy and family shows that delight all ages right here in Orange County. So we go into some more detail here about the different resident companies and what the experience is like and how it's for everyone. And conclude whether you're looking for inspiration, relaxation, the perfect date night, high energy stage magic, or all of the above, this is your destination. For single ticket buyers, we talk a little bit more about what are those things that you can experience, the different types of shows, the different types of experiences, immerse yourself in world celebrated culture, in spectacular spaces right here in your backyard. You're always welcome. This is your destination, and we have affordable tickets. For donors, we're really getting into their role, how they are making this possible. And because for this particular organization, people assumed they were Broadway and for-profit, we're also bringing forward the fact that they are, in fact, in need of donations and in particular, the impact that has on the education programs and how that's utilized across the region. Showing the community impact and how they engage, enrich, and inspire Orange County. Your support ensures that all can discover the magic of the performing arts. Subscribers, securing your seat so that you can have uniquely uplifting, powerful shared experiences. Again, this is your destination. So looking at their visual system, which comes from the architecture of the building, we tweaked the logo that they already had in place to make it pop a little more, change that gray to black writing, and made each of those sub-brands that we saw before as so completely unlike each other to be much more consistent and recognizable with these different colors. And also one for the partnership, ABT William J. Gillespie School, their dance training program. And you see how this works, showing them as a preeminent presenter. We added this Segerstrom Center Presents that can be used in a variety of ways so that we're not just Broadway anymore. Developed a palette of colors. This shows that vibrancy, that fun, that welcoming spirit that they wanted to be more associated with, extended to work in a variety of contexts. Also friendly, bold type, to show that we're welcoming, engaging, impactful, trusted, bring forward those attributes that we're working to cultivate. And this also just shows how you can have imagery in these windows that are built from that architecture and from the logo. We want to show our artists, really feature them, but use them within those particular shapes that are specific to the brand, as well as participants. We want to show people having a good time so we don't have to just say it. Where it all happens, we have spectacular spaces. People should see them. And see how it comes together here. Experience the thrill, inspiration, and fun of the best in performing arts. This is showing a dance brochure, the cover, as well as some of the inside here, bringing forward those different companies' imagery in a way that's still very recognizably Segerstrom. Presenting book here with musical, dance, cabaret performances. Again, that cohesiveness, that vibrancy of color, their signature look and feel. So we'll go through some more of their materials quickly. Nutcracker postcards. Everybody has to have that big holiday show. So you can see how, again, it's clearly theirs and coming through the way they want it to. Like Water for Chocolate, a big premiere that they did in different versions here, as well as digital ads.
So you can compare this to that earlier slide where, everything was completely different. So here, everything's completely different, but it's completely Segerstrom.
Right. And then showing their education programs before, where we had a totally different 5 days of Broadway, summer at the center. Here it's all coming together to show that full picture of impact. And the brand carries through to support materials, showing, the different qualities you're supporting, as well as the different programs, joy, beauty, inspiration, theater, dance, music. You help bring the best performing arts to Orange County. Thank you.
This unfolds.
Yes, and then there's a flap there to put inserts inside if you have a donor who's interested in a specific initiative or to want to give it a certain level, as well as sponsorship proposal. These are created in Word so that they can be adapted on the fly as needed. And goes through to the website as well, much like we saw with Lyric, the same imagery, same messaging, and overall systems. And works on mobile as well. This is showing different modules that can be used across the website. Social media. Here, we want to not just have, again, those artist images, but continue to maintain the brand so that if somebody is just scrolling, they will still see you front and center. And of course, building signage as well. And this is what it looks like when the team at home can work on it from their brand documentation that we saw earlier. So this comes together in a brand book. It goes through the various components of the brand.
Ding, there we are. So, the last sort of part of this, in just a minute or two, just to really stress that strengthening your brand is a process, not an event. We've sort of walked you through that process a little bit, but it's also important that you sort of engage your organization. So, at the end of this are some worksheets you'll seem familiar to you. Thinking about brand attributes in these 3 columns, this is certainly something you can do, within your organization, and then sort of, collect them and then cull them, see, who says what any number of times so that it flows to the top. Getting to sort of the different ways into that sort of messaging. So, for a different constituency, what do they care about, and how does that intersect with your interest, your institutional priorities? And then this diagram, which you're now quite familiar with, thinking about a high level message, but it's not enough. Because again, as I said earlier, planned giving is not the same thing as talking to a parent of an educational program, or talking to, a 20-something who's never come to you. So thinking about how you can tilt those messages and use those different storylines. And then lastly, we've shown you some main messages, but this is a template. It's not going to end up with great English, but it's going to get stuff down. And you can almost do this if you're old enough to remember what Mad Libs is. You can collect a lot of different things to fill in the blank, and then go back and sort of, curate it. So, for, I don't know, certain kind of audience, for millennials, your organization is what? How would you distill it? What's that noun phrase? And you provide, what do you provide? And then how do you provide it? And then what are the benefits you deliver, and with, across what kind of geography? And it's worth coming and buying tickets because why? And or worthy of support. So that's it. We have time for some questions. I know we sort of hustled along, but we actually hit it just on time. So I will stop sharing so I can see you guys. I'm trying to stop sharing.
Roger and Ronnie, that was amazing. It was wonderful, super informative. So far, we have one question in the chat. Jacinia, I don't know if you want to unmute and ask it yourself, or I'm happy to repeat for you.
You can certainly hear people. That'd be great.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jacinia. I work in Seattle at the Seattle Theater Group, and we've been working on branding and such, and have gotten community feedback about how we're not known as a nonprofit, and about a third of our revenue is from contributed revenue like donations. And so I'm wondering how you've seen it done successfully to both define what a nonprofit is, because there was also confusion about what actually a nonprofit is in the community, and then also how to get that messaging out.
Ronnie, you want to take that?
Sure, I can start and then feel free to add on. We do try to put that front and center when that is a concern. So looking at that worksheet where you get to organization is, you could say something depending on your audience, is a nonprofit organization that, brings forward new audiences and new work, creates education programs, whatever it is that you're doing that requires that support. We will sometimes include with our clients in a message for donors that ticket income alone does not cover the expenses needed to develop work, to account for all of the things that we know need to go into the different things that we present.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just making things explicit that you might think are implicit. And, what's true of nonprofits everywhere, more or less, is that people who work in them often think that, the value and the model is self-evident, but it often isn't. So that's where, communications come in. You have to just get it out there, and you have to, it's not for nothing that you keep seeing the same stupid ads on television. Repetition works. Other questions or comments?
Tammy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. I'm just wondering if,
Where are you from, Tim?
oh, sorry, Payment Performing Arts Center in Truro, Massachusetts.
Oh,
And this is the first Zoom affinity group I've been on with you, and it's wonderful and really informative. I'm wondering, do you send the slides along after so that we can take a deeper dive?
sure, we can. We'll get a PDF to Willie who can get it out. It's going to be a big file, but you should be able to download it.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Sure. And Andrea, you look like you had your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I teach grad students, theater management grad students who are very excited to hear these kinds of examples, and I speak to them from my own experience working at an organization too. And they're always really concerned about, well, what do I do when I have really limited resources? Because the reality is that they're going to start their own organizations and they're going to have basic branding abilities. What would you say to someone who doesn't even know where to begin with just the tiniest bit of drop of resource?
Well, what we've walked through does not really depend on money. It depends on sort of putting the thinking on the right side of the cart. So it doesn't take, I mean, yes, we obviously help organizations all the time do this. It's a little harder to do by yourself. But the reason we put those worksheets there is, you can certainly think about attributes, and getting agreement there is important, because if people think if you go around a table and you like do it with index cards, for instance, like what are the positive attributes we're already known for, and you go around the table and you get like completely different answers. They're either combined or they're at odds. Or if you go around to the aspirational column and you get, people say, we want to be this, and someone else, we want to be that. Well, that tells you there's some work to do. So, that kind of thing, and thinking about, what would be in a high level message, but how is that different for a constituent X versus constituent Y? You can do that. Now, that's not going to make people into a good designer. So, the visual part is a little harder to do, DIY, unless you've got someone who really knows what they're doing. But at least you can build a foundation without spending a lot of money. And it will have the internal benefit of showing people that you're either aligned or not aligned. And, then working toward that alignment, and working toward that alignment has a sort of positive morale component, because people feel like, oh, now we're kind of all on the same page. So you can certainly do that part without spending much money. Someone else? Does that help? Anyone else? I know you have a meeting to go to shortly. Okay, well, we can let you go to your meeting, unless someone else has got something in the chat that I'm not looking at.
And everyone, we're going to continue, Tamara and I, for 30 more minutes or so, if you can hang on, if you don't have any more questions for Roger and Ronnie, and we can continue our discussions if you'd like as well.
Okay.
Thank you
well,
so much.
Thanks for your time, and I hope it was useful, and maybe we'll chat with some of you at some other point. Great.
Thank you
Have a
both
good
so
afternoon.
much.